Okay, on that note, then I would like to call to order the Berlin-Boylston Regional Transition School Committee. As a reminder, as always, be aware that we are being recorded and your image and or voice is subject to that recording. Just a quick update before I ask for any public comments. One of the takeaways I took from last week's meeting, and I don't know that it'll ever be an issue. I want to try to keep things smooth, but as well not be in control of when people speak or who is allowed to speak and X, Y, and Z. I want to try to be fluid from that standpoint. My ask will be if anyone from the public outside of public comments has a question, and or if any of our administrative staff or members who typically meet with us during these times has a question during a topic and is looking to make a comment or whatnot, please use the chat functionality and let me know you have a question in the chat functionality. I have it open and I'm going to be watching it. But what I want to do is I think last week went great and I don't think we had any issues, but just in case, so we don't step on anybody's toes and we're not forced to mute everybody and control from that perspective. I wanted to give it a test to use the chat functionality. If you had a question, just let me know you have a question and then I will recognize that person and allow them to ask it. So with that said, do we have any public comments this evening as it relates to our agenda to be discussed? Smaller crew than we had last week, so this will be easy. Everybody's all on one page. This is going to be nice. No public comments, okay. I'm assuming everything is still going honky-dory with approvable payroll and warrants. No issues there, Bob and or Angela and Keith? All good? All right, cool. We are on to the next section of our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Could I please have the first motion for the March
Hey, Jim,
10th?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jim.
Yep.
I think Bob was talking, but he's muted.
Okay.
There are a number of people who are muted.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're fine. They're being approved by Angela and Keith out of the meeting, and they'll get posted to the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. As it relates to the consent agenda and the open meeting minutes, what I'm going to do is, typically, I think in the past, we would take these as one single vote, but with the open meeting laws and the roll call requirements, I think what we'll do is just to make sure we cover our basis, we'll just take the two items as separate votes. So could I please have a motion to approve the open meeting minutes for March 10th, 2020?
So moved.
Seconded. Sue.
Okay. Susan, and then Susan second, and Cliff made the motion, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, roll call vote then. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Could I please have another motion to approve the April 7th, 2020 open meeting minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
Susan, then Cliff for the second. Roll call vote, please. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Okay, the next section of our agenda for this evening's communications. I do not have any communications this evening. Is there any other committee member that has any communications?
So you saw that the Berlin rescheduled their town meeting. Did everyone see that? I don't know if the Boylston people are aware of that.
I did not see that, but so thank you. What did they choose a date?
They did. It's in June, towards the end of June, and they scheduled it for, sorry.
The 27th, I believe.
Yeah, that's the 22nd, actually.
The 22nd?
And the 29th is town election.
Yep.
Yeah, Monday, June 22nd at 7:30.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Angela.
Mhm.
Any other communications? Okay, moving to the agenda. Jeff, you're up first.
All right. So the first item is town facility cleaning assistance. The town administrators reached out, both towns have reached out to us and asked if they could borrow our custodians to do some additional cleaning. So we were more than happy to do it, mostly around disinfection of their buildings. And we loaned them our backpack sprayer. So I haven't heard anything, so I guess that's going okay. I know the police station was supposed to be disinfected too in our building. We've been doing our building anyway. So that's that item. Just if you see one of our custodians in their facilities, that's what it is, in another town facility. The next item is DESE updates. We had a meeting with the commissioner's usual meeting is on Friday, which I thought the MCAS issue would be then. Instead, it was in the paper on Saturday, and the updates were today. So that's the first update. As you know, the MCAS has been canceled for this year. There's no word on next year what's going to happen with the MCAS. Some of the superintendents have asked, asked to also waive them for next year, but there's no plan to do that. The status of the competency determination is still on hold. As you know, in order to graduate, everybody, all the seniors have to pass math, ELA, and then one of the technology, science and technology classes, biology, test, like biology, chemistry, intro to physics, and science and technology. So that's on hold. See, a lot of these things like MCAS, they're tied up not only in federal law, but in state law. So the commissioner can't just make a decision. It has to come from the governor first in the legislature. So we'll wait on that. We think we're going to have something on that this week. There also will be some words soon on whether we're actually going to go back on May 6th. That's still up in the air. But if you look at the curve for Massachusetts, with the peak being in late April, May 6th seems like it may not happen. But again, there's no official word on that. Student Opportunity Act has been delayed until May 15th. We had ours in weeks ago, so that doesn't really affect us. Another issue came up, and I don't know, this is the first time I've heard it. September 14th, which is the new date for the Boston Marathon. Some superintendents asked if Governor Baker was going to make that a holiday, in which case it would affect our calendar. But that's not usually how it works. Usually there's, it's Patriots Day, and then the marathon happens to fall on that day, not the other way around. But the commissioner took the question, and he seemed like there was some talk about it. So we'll see what happens with that. And then the last update, indirectly related to the DESE, is the superintendent goals. With the COVID-19, I've had to change my goals a little. So I just wanted to run them by you because I know I have to have my report next month. And I'll have that, I think it's on the 19th. But I just wanted to go through them quickly. My first goal was the mentoring of the principals, which I had been doing on a monthly basis. With this school closure, so that's changed. I obviously can't go into the schools and do that. But I have been working with the principals, and they have been working with the teachers. And it's really a different world for them. One of the things we were doing is to sort of think about what teachers need the most support and spend the most of time with those teachers. But with this, there are a lot of teachers who up front need a lot of support just to get up and running. So I'll have more. I've been meeting with the principals on a regular basis, so I'll have more on that next month. Goal number 2 was the goal to broaden community engagement. Except for official business, which I've done more than I probably normally would have done, I haven't got to go to any fun things like bingo night. So I was looking forward to bingo night. Obviously that goal is done. Again, I've done some more things with town officials than I normally would do, really around this COVID-19. So that's that goal. Yeah, goal 3 was, let's see. So I had, my goal was is really my mentoring goal. So there was 2 pieces of it. One was to meet with my mentor at least once a month. And so obviously I can't meet in person, but I've been meeting with her much more than once a month, I can tell you that. And it's really been good to have her there to answer a lot of these questions. Second part of that was the RBT, doing some additional conferences. Those have all been canceled, so I can't do any of that. And the last goal was the goal on enrollment. So I've had to change that a little. Originally my goal was to meet more with town people and do some conferencing with them around setting up a plan for what do we do when and if this enrollment increases. So I've had to change that a little bit, and I've spent more time meeting with principals and talking to them about their needs in the school and some what-if scenarios if and when the enrollment increases in the schools. Actually, I was talking to Bob today about this, how this COVID-19 might affect the enrollment. So that's another piece of it that I've been looking at in terms of its effect on building, building permits and things like that. So it might actually give us a little bit of a break in terms of, might be a little gap here and what we intended for this enrollment increase. So those are basically my updates and my change to my goals. I didn't know if anybody had any questions.
Jeff, is RBT doing anything online, or are they just tabling everything because everybody's maxed out?
No, it is, but it's not the kind of stuff I would. I mean, I've signed up for some stuff, but it's like John Dioria is having something on social emotional learning tomorrow, but it's not around the mentoring piece.
Yeah.
I guess that indirectly is, it's a support, how to support educators using social emotional techniques, but not the direct mentoring stuff that I was scheduled to go to.
I see.
I really only missed one of them, but also there was things like the Mars meetings they've all been canceled.
Yep.
The legislative breakfast, which is usually in April, that was canceled. So all of the stuff in the fall that you go to related to things like budget and upcoming events for the new year and really related to mentoring of principals, that stuff's all off the table.
It might be good to at least list, when you give your final report, all the additional meetings and sessions you are attending, even though they're not exactly aligned with your goal.
Yep.
All these updates that you're attending and communications with area superintendents, et cetera, as you figure things out, those really supplant these other things that you would have been going to. So you may as well document those.
Okay.
Jeff, you talked quickly about enrollment and looking at how it might affect enrollment. Have you taken into consideration that? I think that'll affect school choice at all.
I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna play out with school choice. It could, depending on. I mean, I don't know if it will next year, but certainly when kids go back to school, I don't know how parents are gonna how parents, what effect that's going to have on parents. Are they going to want their kids to switch schools? I don't think in this area it really will, because I've looked at the plans from the districts around us, and we all kind of shared the same thing, and I don't see anything that's much different than us. So I don't see anybody making any kind of sweeping changes in terms of where they want their kids to go, or whether we're gonna have kids who want to go anyplace else. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in terms of enrollment or any of that?
I have kind of a specific question, and I suspect you may not know the answer. The apartment complex in Berlin, I don't know, since I don't get out much anymore, whether, is that proceeding on schedule?
I don't know that. I don't know if that's considered an essential building. And I actually went by there on Friday. I didn't notice anything, but well, they have a plan this summer, to evaluate the enrollment piece that's gonna affect. So my guess is that that's still on, since it's not scheduled to happen until after some of those units have been filled. But if they're not building, that will affect the initial rentals of those apartments. They were scheduled to have that building in front, that first one done, and they were going to rent. I think the rentals were going to begin in April. So I think that's got to be out the window. But I don't have an answer for it.
But even still during the school year, then students who might come in the fall might, in the original projection, may be coming in mid-year or sometime else during the school year instead.
Yeah, and that's not going to be a good thing, because at least if they were enrolled in the spring, or we knew there were kids there, we'd be able to make some additional planning. But I have no idea. The worst thing always is when kids show up in the middle of the year, or they show up in October, because you just haven't planned for them.
Yeah.
So.
You also made an observation that, you weren't sure what effect this was having on construction of new homes or new permits or those kinds of things. I don't have any scientific information on that, but anecdotally, because that's what I spend my time in real estate, I have to say new construction has not slowed down. There are projects that were started and they're still going. So that may change, but right now I think projects that were started are still being built. I don't think they've stopped.
Well, that just dashed that hope. Well, if that's true, then, because there's I think it's the 66 unit building. It's the 66 unit, buildings that are going in Boylston, and I didn't notice last Friday either if those are still being built. So if they're still being built, then those kids are coming too. But that's good information to know, at least.
Well, I think it's at least something to be aware of. That I know I've had some friends who have said, well, nothing's being built, everything is stopped. And I've had to say, well, that's not really true. And I point out some specific examples about home developments that are still continuing to be constructed.
Huh.
And that's probably because the money behind those developments, the banks, the investors are insisting that they move forward. And the governor has not stopped construction. So until such time as he does, I think there may be people who are going to move ahead.
Yeah, that's good information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure the Boylston, those are the units are still being built. I remember passing by there last week and I thought I saw them still building. So.
Yeah. So okay. So then those kids, then those, whoever's gonna be in there, that'll happen.
Can I ask a question about Assabet? I heard that the acceptance letters went out this week, and I heard that some kids were waitlisted. I was curious what our protocol is, and maybe just from being new, I don't know this, but if kids are waitlisted, do we still count on them possibly going, and does that go towards the budget? Because they could be accepted closer to, say, August or September if they don't fill those slots.
Yeah, and they might too. We have 10 kids, we have 10 students who are waitlisted right now. So those are all possible students who get in later in the year. This has affected a lot of that. So, it's possible, 10 kids going, we have 10 kids just from Boylston that are on the wait list. And I think there may be 1 or 2 from no, there's none from Berlin. But we got 10 from Boylston. That would be a big deal. That would affect our budget, because that could happen. Because what happens? What happens is kids decide, they get accepted, and then they decide over the summer, maybe I don't want to go there, or they move, or something happens, and they pull the next kid. Or if a kid from another town, doesn't want to go, and they start going through the wait list. So yeah, I mean, all 10 of them, that's pretty unlikely, but it's possible. It's not probable, but it is possible.
How many were accepted?
I don't have my list here.
That's okay. I was just curious.
I have a process question, Jeff, about that.
Yeah.
Do students from member towns who apply automatically get accepted, or do they get waitlisted as well?
No, they don't get waitlisted.
Okay. So the waitlisted kids in our particular case in our region would be Boylston kids only.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I thought.
I mean, it would have to be full. It would have to be at capacity. That's why there's so many kids waitlisted there. So all of the member town kids get in, and then they start going after that. That's why all of our kids are from Boylston. That's how I know there's none from Berlin.
Okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted that confirmed. I wasn't sure.
Did we lose Jim?
Oh, did Jim leave the meeting?
There he is. Okay.
No, I'm still here. I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's all I got, Jim.
Okay. All right. So it looks like, Bob, you're up next.
So first item on my report was a facilities update, just to give people an overview. The guidance from the state was pretty clear, the last guidance that came out, that we should just be having health, safety, building checks type work being done. We shouldn't be planning, if they haven't already started, we shouldn't be planning new projects. They're thinking more construction, but I think we took that guidance to mean, not expanding the scope of our staff's work. So what we have them doing right now is going in for 3 to 4 hours, doing a check at the beginning of the shift, check at the end of their shift, and then doing some cleaning in between. So there are 2 projects, however, that have started. They've been kind of underway, one of them for a while, that they're still going to be happening. One of them is septic system repairs and refurbishment at Boylston Elementary School. These are old tanks. We've had problems. I think I've talked about this before. There's some additional work that's needed on this, and we're going to take advantage of the break and schedule that work sometime. It might already be scheduled in the coming weeks. And similarly, we have, I think it's the same vendor doing some work on the cistern tank at Berlin Memorial. These 2 projects, I would say, are kind of health and safety related. So we felt they were important that we move ahead with those. The next item on my agenda is a budget status update. I posted a report summarizing the balances by school and by category. So we obviously are in better financial shape than we would have otherwise been. That said, there are some, there's savings on some items. There are some expenditures we're going to incur too that I'll talk about, but we are paying all of our regular staff. We're paying, so we're not really saving on salaries. We potentially are going to save on salaries for the athletic coaches, depending on whether we have the season or not. It's not clear yet. If we go back to school, which I don't think is realistic on May 4th, May 5th, whatever the date is, we potentially have around a half season, whatever the length of the season is, we'd have some payments. So we anticipate saving from salaries for athletics would be one area in athletics, and salaries would be saving. The biggest category that has dollars showing on those reports is instruction and instructional support. Across the 3 schools, it's around $300,000. And that's comprised of a few things. Kind of looking at some of the big items, 62,000 of that's hardware and software. We will spend nearly all of that. I don't think that's not going to be savings that come out of that. We have about 40,000 in substitute teachers, which we'd expect not to spend much of that. It depends on whether we go back to school or not, but we'd imagine that there'd be some significant savings there. We have 42,000 in instructional materials. Some of that is what we would call consumable materials for things that are used in the classroom, science materials, things like that. Another part of that instructional materials is actually replacing curriculum. So we will spend, and that's the bulk of those dollars. We will spend most of the instructional materials money, and there's a few other lines. There's 24,000 in course reimbursement. We'll probably save some of that, spend some of that. So at this point, we anticipate, there's maybe going to be 50,000 in the instructional support category that we'll have left at the end of the year. In other categories, we anticipate, it's a later agenda item. We anticipate that there'll be some savings on transportation based on agreements that we're reaching with the bus vendor. What we intend to do with this savings is to, I would say, set aside as much of it as we can to help with offsetting budget issues we're going to have in FY21 and FY22. And that might include building up school choice, might include building up E&D, it might include buying some curriculum materials that we were scheduled to buy next year, buying them at the end of this year instead, where we've already identified which materials we want to purchase. We won't do that if we're not sure what we're going to be getting. So I think, we're not, financially in bad shape for this fiscal year. Really, the issue is next fiscal year. And that kind of leads into my next item, but I'll pause there. Is there any questions on the FY20 budget update? Hearing none, as Jim would say, I'll move forward. So for FY21, we've just, we don't have any specifics other than feedback from, I got separate communications. Well, Jeff and I have heard from Berlin a couple times where they wanted us to kind of pause, and they're not sure what the impact of this is. And the town meeting's pushed out. They've established a freeze on their budget in town. And I think they're going to be looking for some sort of reduction, but we're trying to get a sense of what that would be. I do know they have a significant commercial base in Berlin. They don't have any meals tax. They're not getting much in the way of, I wouldn't say, not as much in terms of meals tax, things like that. And if any businesses fail, that could hit their tax base. Boylston is more residential. I think in this case, this might be one of the times that Boylston is less impacted. But we still had a communication from one of the finance committee members asking if we could, if we had any savings this year, if we could apply it to next year's budget, since next year's budget is a very significant increase to the town of Boylston. So that's where we are now. I think with a lot of things, as we move forward, we'll get more information. Jeff and I will talk more about it, and just, I think we'll look to, depending on the timing, we may look to bring some recommendations to the May school committee meeting. Hopefully we'll have some guidance from both towns before we do that. But we certainly can identify what we think we can save from this year's budget and maybe put some of that towards next year's budget. Okay, if there's no questions on that, I'll move on to the next item. So I've been spending a fair amount of time on the phone with other school business officials and with our vendor, and we have an update on the bus settlement agreement, and I emailed those documents this afternoon. I don't know if everybody received those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So previously, when I had spoken, we were talking about paying 92.5% to 95% and receiving the NRT's tax credits that they were going to receiving those later. They were going to be passed on to us. Essentially, those tax credits relate to payroll for their employees getting paid. So, aside from the pushback from me, they've heard from other districts, and based on that, they basically built those tax credits into the rate we're going to pay. So instead of having to have 92 and getting the credits later, the 80% is reflective of kind of the final settlement. We don't have to worry about the tax credits. I've seen a variety of other ranges for other vendors. NRT is, I think, the third biggest transportation provider in the state. I've heard one vendor settled at 88%. I heard, some of the mom and pop ones where they have really old buses. One of them settled at 50%. We've heard some where they just said lay off the drivers and we're not going to pay, and those are different issues. Not too many, I think just a couple. So this is what this 80% will do, is it'll enable them to keep paying their employees, keep their vehicles insured. If we do have to come back to school this year, they'll be ready to do that. And they'll definitely be ready to come back in September. And they've also, they're working on getting, related to this, they are our vendor for next year, as the next 5 years as well. So they're going to be providing us a performance bond for that. And I don't have a signed contract from him. He verbally agreed to this with me, but he's having some technical difficulties with his printer at home. So we'll have to get the actual signed document later. But I did want to bring that to the group tonight and get a approval for it, and then I can follow up with Jim later to get it signed. All in all, I think it's we're making the best of a bad situation, and I'd recommend that we move forward with the agreement.
Hey, Bob, is there any way that you could get him in an email to state that he's in agreement? Because an email can be considered legally binding, just so that it's not just a handshake. I mean, it seems like you have a really good relationship with him, but I just thought that might be another way to keep it a little more enforceable.
He will be signing it. I will get it in writing from him. He just said he couldn't do it tonight. It'll be tomorrow.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize it was that soon.
Yeah. And until we basically, Jim and Jim will sign off as school committee chair for the district, and then he'll sign it as well. So we'll have this in writing. Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't do it without having it in writing.
Excellent. Thanks.
And then there's also a contract, which I think is a little bit more routine. That's just a standard bus contract. That's for the next 5-year cycle. And that's just there for everybody's review, but I don't think there's much I need to add to that. And that's my report.
Okay. Any further questions for Bob as it relates to the two? We'll be voting on those two items later in the agenda. So if anybody has any questions, we could.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I think the verbal agreement you've come to, the 80%, is very fair, and I'm glad you were able to accomplish that. So kudos to you for working it out and getting that agreement. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much.
I'd like to say it was fun, but well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Not hearing any other comments or questions, so we will move forward. Karen, you are up.
Okay, thanks. I gave you a little bit of a background of just what our department is doing. Just in case you get questions as we go forward, I wanted you to have a little bit of background. With special ed, there's so many legal mandates, I thought there might be a few more questions. So I just wanted to kind of review with you. The team meetings are happening. We're doing them virtually. We're getting parent permission. We're able to send the IEPs out, and we're now able to virtually sign them. It's something that's been added since all of this started. So we're now able to get them signed and get them back to them. So that process is happening. The only ones that are a concern are the kids that needed to have some testing done, and we weren't able to test them. It's not possible to test them virtually. It's not valid. So that's a little bit on hold, and we are working on a plan. When we know when we're going back, we'll come up with a plan for how we're going to work through all of this gradually. But most of the team meetings are happening, and we're happy about that. We've had great participation with the staff and with the parents. We also, they're doing all of the teaching and learning is happening. We're meeting with staff several times a week to go over what's happening. And they've been really very busy with all of that. The special ed is also developing individual learning plans that talk about how their goals in the IEP are addressed. So those are all going out to parents. Hopefully next week we'll have all of that collected. It's quite a piece of work to collect all of that information, but our plan is to have it go next week. But they've had verbal conversations with parents so that the parents already know what we're doing with all of that. The outer districts, we also have some pieces in place. Our nurses, our ELL staff, our counselors are all working with the families. They're doing all kinds of things, including delivering lunches to a couple of them and getting them some emotional support and helping parents with behavior, which has been a real concern, checking in on some of our students that we're more concerned with. So they've been involved. And at the leadership team last week, Jeff had decided that maybe we needed to create a committee to kind of look at that whole emotional piece as we transition back. And so we got that set up this week, and we have nursing staff and counseling staff to look at kind of the district-wide issues. School-based, they're working on their own, but a lot of it is around kind of supporting our staff emotionally and supporting our students once we start transitioning back to school. So they're starting to have some conversations about that piece as well. I gave you a legal update. We had talked about the potential for a lawsuit in Berlin, where we were attached to another district because one of the parents lived in our town. I'm happy to say that our lawyers prevailed, and Deese has said that they should not have attached us, and so we are out of that for now. And so I wanted to let you know that piece of it. And the last one is just Student Opportunity Act. I don't know if Carol has that in her report as well, but I think we both wanted to celebrate that it actually got submitted and we pushed the button and it's gone. Any questions on anything?
I have a question.
Sure.
Karen, are you able to put a percentage on the number of plans that haven't been able to be completed because of the necessary testing?
If I guess I'm guessing, Cliff.
Sure,
It's
fair enough.
probably, there's about maybe 10%. It's a small number. We've tried to get a lot of our kids tested throughout the year, so there's not that many. There are some new referrals that kids coming out of EI who are just turning 3 and would be coming to us, and that's a little bit challenging because we can't really start them and get the data. But for the most part, I think it's a relatively small number. I'm concerned that when we come back, we're all going to be looking for extra help to do this testing to get the backlog. And so all the districts will be looking for people, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot. So what we talked about at the state level is maybe a schedule, and it may be spread out, this extra testing may be spread out over the year. So we'll work on that piece of it.
Thank you, Karen.
Any other questions for Karen?
I have a question. I'm just saying there must be a timeline for the testing, and the testing timeline has probably been expanded, do you think, or will be?
Yeah, the actual timeline is 45 days from the time the parents sign the permission till when we have an IEP meeting. But the minute the schools close, that timeline stops. And so we need to do all of the ones that are in process, but the state is looking at some rules about how we make up that backlog.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difficulty in some ways is the lag in services starting for children who qualify for services once that testing is done. I mean, in most cases, that testing would have been done in the spring, and they would have started the new school year with services figured out and in place and ready to go. And so now they will have, if those who qualify will have a delay in getting those services till all that testing gets done.
That's a concern.
Tough. I don't know. Wish there was an easy answer to that. I don't know what that would be.
Well, Karen, you referenced EI, and I know what a challenge that is. I spent a year in Wachusett as the Early Childhood Center director. Man, that is a tough job under the ideal circumstances, bringing those kids in and getting it in place.
And I don't believe we're going to be able to test those kiddos till probably September. So we have kids turning 3 with a large gap in between. So
yeah,
we're looking at it every day, but no easy answers yet.
yeah.
It's not possible to do any of that testing in the summer, potentially, like even though the schools aren't in session.
I think there's a question of whether we could do that. Staff obviously aren't working in the summer, but whether we could find a way to do it, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I would think that
when we go back.
I would think they would make offer some, I don't know what, stipends or something in order to get some of that done during the summer, if that's possible.
There's been conversation at the state special ed meeting that they may not have extended school year services this summer, which is a whole separate piece of it. So I don't even know where that piece of it stands, whether they'll actually do those summer services for the neediest kids.
Wow.
Hoping that that'll still be in place.
Wow.
Can I assume that children who have weekend services aren't getting them as well?
And have what kind of services?
Well, we had students in my experience who had weekend services.
I can say we don't have any that have non-school day services,
Okay,
but even students who have like home tutoring and things like that, those are not, they're not in place.
okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Moving on to Carol. Sorry.
Good evening. I wanted to just mention a few items from my report. First, we finished our last PD day in March. That was a short time period. It was 2 hours. It was a half-day PD for the teachers, but we did quite a bit, I think, during that time frame. And fortunately, we did do that work. Really helped us in preparing for what was to come after that. As Jeff mentioned earlier, we're looking at PD for next year and certainly making some adjustments to what we had intended, at least for the first few PD days in the fall. So we're working on that. I also wanted to mention we received a $2,000 grant from LRIG New England. That's a private group that supports science and technology initiatives. This was for Tohoto, and it went toward technology, in particularly Rich Ironman's class on robotics. I did want to mention this because the grant was brought to our attention by one of our parents in the community, Paul Danis, so we wanted to thank him for bringing that grant forward to our attention. So I'm grateful that we received the grant. Finally, I just wanted to let you know that we've been refining the remote learning plan. Last week, the Tohoto teachers and Diane, the representatives from that task force, and department chairs, middle school instructional leaders there, focused on the fourth quarter grading. And then they did specifically designate what was going to happen for grades during that time period. It's in the plan, but I think they just broke it down more specifically. And I plan to do that with the elementary school as well. Next week, we have elementary task force members that I want to work with for the elementary schools. We do have standards-based report card, so it will look different, I think, than what we've been typically doing, but we're certainly not going to operate on that pass-fail. I think grading is recommended by the commissioner, but it's hard to imagine a 5-year-old, I think, getting a pass or fail on their report card, and we definitely want to be sensitive to that. So with that team, we're going to work on that as well. So that's my report. Any questions?
Thank you, Carol. Any questions for Carol?
I wonder if you'll just follow up on that in May, Carol, and let us know what that's going to look like.
The remote plan?
And the report cards and grading.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
My turn.
And yep. Oh, we'll move right through. Go ahead.
So I also will be very brief. Last week I didn't chime in with my thanks, but obviously it was a huge donation, and it really helped a lot of families, and it really helped our technology department as well, those two $10,000 donations. So I did want to make sure I made it a part of my report this week to get that thanks out. It's not only going to help us on this end, getting stuff to families quicker, but it also probably will save us steps when, again, as I said in the report, when that happy day when we return and have to get everything back and running in our building, it should make life a little bit easier for that as well. So I wanted to make sure I chimed in with that. I did have a little bit of an update for you in terms of numbers of devices that have gone out. Again, that's a moving target. Again, as people make requests, we do our best to fulfill as quick as we can. And knock on wood, so far so good.
Paul, are there still outstanding requests that families have made that we haven't been able to address yet?
So none that I know of. We are working through some issues with some of the lower grades. They're used to having iPads, and so it's a little bit different prep to get those out the door. But typically, you know, a turnaround has been 3 or 4 days. Once someone contacts the principal, we usually have something in the principal's hands to hand back out within a 3 or 4 days.
And do we know if all the families have the internet access that they need to use these devices?
So we have not heard of anybody yet. The principals have not heard of anybody struggling with that. Again, we've put out information on our website and in my updates for folks to try to get free or low cost internet access. We have not heard of any direct, but again, this is the first official week of the learning plan, so that may happen, and we'll do our best to try to work through that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Jim. More a general question, but I think I read somewhere in the learning plan or something that each of the elementary teachers was going to reach out to each family. I just wanted to ask if that happened or is happening that you're aware of. I know it's more a question for the principals. Just to make sure everyone's being captured.
Carol may have a better idea than I have with that because she's in more contact with the principals. I tend to get more email requests of looking for materials. Again, that was the plan, and that the principals were going to follow up with their teachers to make sure that happened. But I don't know the status of that.
Angela, I would just add on, we have been talking to the teachers every week, and we have meetings with the grade levels. I really have to say that most of those parents have been contacted by the teachers. They're in constant communication with back and forth with them. I think there are very few students that we haven't heard from at this point, or we may have, I should say, heard from once or twice. We're trying to reach out to them more, but I know that the teachers are making effort to contact families and pretty much speak with all the children. Very few are left behind for sure right now.
Is there are we keeping any kind of attendance records?
Yes, absolutely. Starting 2 weeks ago, we asked the teachers to please start teach. I think it was 2 weeks ago. We started asking teachers to take attendance on the students in a more formal manner, so we could identify those students that we were not hearing from, and for the exact, for that reason. So, and they continue to take attendance all the way through the grade levels, right up and through high school.
This is maybe a question for Jeff. Jeff, in the new accountability system, isn't attendance one of the factors that they, or Carol, that they factor into your ratings?
Yes, they actually waived it. So the last attendance they'll take was what was sent out on March 2nd. So, and it goes into the accountability and the, what's the word for it? The chronic absenteeism, which is one of the ratings.
Right.
So we can hand it in, but they won't, because some of the systems that some of the schools use requires all of the data to be in. So they won't use anything after March 2nd.
Okay.
All
right. So the attendance that we're doing now is appropriately being used to sort of just track, do we have everybody with us?
Yeah, exactly. So the reason we did it 2 weeks ago is because we knew we were going to have to, once we knew that we were going to have to sort of move this, the remote learning to another level, we knew we had to start reaching out to families and to find out if they had, if they needed any kind of technology. So that's why we started it 2 weeks ago. And we purposely put in there, this is not a punitive attendance. This is just to find out what you need. So.
Good. Okay, thank you.
And I also received something from Dees this week, Susan, in regards to that, basically saying that there is no current plan to do anything with attendance going forward. And they don't even know for sure at this point if they're going to count that as part of the accountability for next year. It hasn't been formally decided yet, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in hearing more about that as this goes forward in May, June. Just what percentage of students do we have participating in this remote learning plan, as we're hoping they all do? But I'm curious what percentage we actually have with us.
Well, one of the things we've tried to do is, we try to really focus on the fact that it's a remote learning plan. That's one of the things the commissioner stresses, that, get away from this idea that it's an online learning and it's a remote learning. So we made sure that each teacher has some piece in there that's not related to that. That it's just a project kind of thing. So I don't know what the numbers are. My guess is they're going to be pretty high, because we purposely made sure that the entire plan doesn't rest on technology. A good portion of it, certainly, we want to get that technology into their hands. And again, Paul and Dave have been doing a great job, but it doesn't rest on it.
What can I say? Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting dilemma, because it puts us back to the position of thinking about, we used to do a lot of thinking in schools about what's being taught as opposed to what's being learned. And we're kind of back in that spot right now. We're focusing a lot on figuring out how to teach remotely, but we're not in such a great position to gauge what's being learned under this scenario. So it's an interesting dilemma.
Yeah, it's almost like the time before there were learning standards where you just sort of taught. You kind of taught what you
Right.
You didn't necessarily go page by page in the book, but that was your guiding. You had some guiding documents, but you didn't have those standards, and you didn't have an MCAS, so you didn't have that kind of accountability. And you know what I find that's interesting about the learning plan is that, one of the things I said when Carol and I met with the teachers a couple of weeks ago before they worked on this plan was that, this is one of the few times that you're not going to have these constraints from the Department of Ed. And it's been the things that we always say, if we didn't have to do this,
Right.
we could do a great job teaching. But you know what, I find that teachers, and this is in all districts, they're so connected to that. It's been beat into them for 20 years now that, you teach and then they take the test. That one of the struggles is to get them away from this idea that they don't have to cover everything, because they're on such a treadmill to cover so much material. It's part of it is to change that mindset.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we have the time to do that, but that's the biggest challenge I see, or one of them at least.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Any other questions for Paul? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We are moving on to school committee goals. And Susan, you are up first.
Okay, first, before I get into school committee goals, I just wanted to update people to let you know about the policy subcommittee. The policy subcommittee has not been meeting during all this. I just want to put that out there. And I checked in with Jeff, and we've decided that the policy subcommittee will just lay low until at least mid-May, maybe late May. I just didn't want to crowd Jeff's and Christie's plates right now unless we had something pressing. So we're just going to let them deal with what they need to deal with, and see if we can get things up and running again later in May, maybe June. Okay, so the superintendent evaluation, we have a workshop scheduled for April 28th, 6 p.m. I just want to remind everybody, 6 p.m. We'll see if we can not be late for this. Dorothy Presser, Jim, I'm assuming is joining us. Was that confirmed?
I've talked to her. She is confirmed and will be there and is fully
And everybody now on the school committee has hard copy versions of the superintendent evaluation document, the guidance information. And Jeff, I have a hard copy for you if you would like a hard copy so you can look along with us. If you would like a copy, please just let me know where you want me to deliver it. And if anybody has questions when you're looking at that, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to talk with you. So upcoming things with the superintendent evaluation. On May 19th, Jeff will be giving a verbal and a written year-end report around his goals and including some of the flexible ways of understanding those goals that he was describing earlier tonight. And in addition on that eve, sometime on the 19th, everybody in the school committee will receive a link to the school for our first school committee self-assessment. That tool is in those notebooks that I gave you and in the guidance document that's online. And I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's a very comprehensive self-assessment tool that MASC has developed. We'll be giving it a kind of a pilot run. It's going to probably feel long because it covers everything that school committees are aiming to do well. By taking the time to do that this year, that will help us really think how to narrow our focus and set our goals appropriately next year. But also it helps us to consider how our performance as a school committee may intersect with the superintendent's performance as we enter his final evaluation. And I think that's very important to consider. With sometimes we have expectations of a superintendent that are not fair based on the school committee's own functioning. So it's an opportunity to reflect a bit before we do Jeff's evaluation, and it should inform our goal setting in the fall. I think that's everything for right now. Does anybody have any questions about where we're headed with the evaluation at this point?
No question, but I wanted to thank you, Susan, for putting together those binders. I thought they were great. I really appreciate the work and effort you did.
I think sometimes with a long document, it's easier to see it in hard copy and you can flip through or see sections or key documents. So good. I'm glad if that's helpful. That's good.
Yeah, I would echo what Angela said. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
Although mine got wet.
Oh, I wondered about that. It was just starting to rain when I was dropping these off.
No, I'm just teasing. It got a little damp. Don't worry. A little hair dryer action got good.
You mean she didn't text you that it's starting to rain? Susan texted me that it's starting to rain when she dropped mine off.
Here.
Also, too, I think what's great about that new school committee self-evaluation, I think it's good too, because it kind of shows the best practice and then what you're not supposed to do, you know? I thought that was pretty good, pretty good learning tool.
Yeah, we'll see when we really go through it. We can also provide feedback to MASC if we think anything should be modified in that tool. So keep that hat on too while you're completing it. That's to come in May. I'm all done, Jim?
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind too is during the next 2 weeks, as we prepare for our workshop, governance workshop with Dorothy, to be thinking about the questions that we have or any, I think it would be beneficial if we did have any questions and or topics that we wanted to focus on with Dorothy. We tried to prepare her from that standpoint. So if anybody had anything that they wanted to make sure we covered, or at least was part of the agenda for that, please send it to me so that I can work with Dorothy on that.
Yep. Good.
Thank you, Susan.
Welcome.
And I don't know, your folder is color coded. I commend you for keeping different colored paper in your arsenal at home, because straight white and Spencer household, I can tell you that. I was trying to think of the type of paper that they always reference in the office, and I couldn't draw from it, but I'll think of it as soon as we get off this.
Yeah, right.
Angela, any updates on the handbook?
I'm sorry, I don't have any updates.
Okay. Lori and Keith, though, do we have any updates from a finance perspective?
Yeah, we finished the terms, and Bob's going to take a look at them just to make sure that we got the information correct and our interpretation was spot on. So he's going to take a look at that when he has a chance, and then we can get it out to you.
Great.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as we moving through, nice and smooth here, we have come to business items. So we will obviously be continuing the format of the roll call vote. So we'll do our best to get through the list of items here. First is a motion to approve the Marion Hoffman Award.
Before I make that motion, there's 2 fifth grade classes this year, right?
There too.
At Berlin Memorial, since it only applies to Berlin Memorial, this particular award.
Yeah.
There's 2 classes in every grade in Berlin.
Oh, okay. I really should know that, but I don't. Can't keep it straight. All right. Can I make a motion to approve 2 $25 Marion Hoffman Awards for the Berlin Memorial School 5th grade recognition, funded by the Marion Hoffman Trust?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay. Roll call. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Sorry,
Hi.
hello, this is Kristen Collins. I'm sorry, I'm just figuring out how to unmute myself. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Berlin Memorial School.
Fun.
There's only 1 5th grade class at Berlin Memorial School.
Did you ask Boylston or Berlin?
I asked for Berlin. Yeah,
Berlin
thank you.
Memorial has 1 5th grade class.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. All right, so can I'm sorry, Jim, can we amend that then to one $25 award?
All right, Angela, would you mind just making the motion again for me? And we'll
Sure.
redo it, please.
So I make a motion that we approve one $25 Marion Hoffman Award to be funded by the Marion Hoffman Trust for the Berlin Memorial School 5th grade recognition.
And I'll second that again.
Thank you, Cliff. Okay. Let's roll. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Lori?
Lori? Lori, you're on mute.
No, she's not.
I'm not.
Oh, now we can hear you. Okay.
Aye.
Thank you. Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. And I didn't take my own advice, and I looked to the right of me in the chat session, and I was given the information that there's only 1 5th grade class in Berlin, and shame on me for not taking my own advice and looking at the chat session. So thank you to Amy as well for letting us know that there was only 1 class. Okay. Item B is approval of grade 5 Nature's Classroom field trip application, BES and BMS.
I make a motion to approve the Nature's Classroom field trip for BES and BMS.
Second.
Thanks, Keith. Any questions, comments, concerns on this one? Okay, roll to the vote. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number C is to approve the school choice recommendations. All 3 were added to the drive as well.
Can I ask a question? Maybe I should wait till the motion, but when we were talking earlier about the Assabet Valley, all the students that were waitlisted from Boylston, I'm not looking at the numbers in front of me, but it seemed like they thought maybe 25 kids were going to go, and they recommended, I think, 10. I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering if there's going to be any concern if we vote in all those 9th grade school choice slots and not all the kids that wanted to go to Assabet are able to go.
Also, I'm going to piggyback on that for a second, because if I understood the memo correctly, these school choice allotments aren't due to the state until June 1st. Is that right? Thought I read that today.
That's correct. They've pushed the date out.
So can we push this vote out? Would that be helpful for us? We have a meeting on the 19th. We could do it then.
Do we know, I mean, but we don't, I'm not sure pushing the vote out provides us any, I'm not sure what that provides us, seeing that I'm not sure is there a date that students would hear about being on the waiting list? I mean, I'm not sure pushing it out off the agenda makes sense just from a voting perspective, unless
They know. Those kids would know if they've been accepted or waitlisted. Is that what you asked?
No, I'm not asking anything. What I'm stating is, I think, based on what I reviewed for Tohoto, it looks like there was an asterisk that was based on taking into consideration the Assabet applications, and I know there's a large number obviously waitlisted, but I'm not sure that we would know that information even if we pushed it out, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know if I see a value to push this vote out, unless someone else has another particular comment.
I'm looking to Jeff to advise on that, or whether any other factors might influence those choice recommendations.
I guess I don't understand what's the advantage to pushing the vote out?
Just whether we would have, it buys us any flexibility in terms of those being our final numbers when there are still factors in play out there. Even the building, we don't.
I don't think it does. I mean, because you could always come back with another vote. We did it this year. I mean, you could always approve these school numbers, and then, well, you know what? If you approve these numbers, you can add more, but it'd be difficult to pull numbers out. I don't think there'd be a significant difference.
Yeah, I mean, when our applications to school choice due, and when do we notify folks who have applied for school choice of the slots?
Jim, typically the applications are due to the schools that you're applying to by May 1st.
And when does
Is that true this year?
accept?
Is that, I'm just wondering if that's true this year or if that's been,
We haven't discussed any change in that due to the school closure, but in past years, it's always been May 1st. And then we do a lottery if necessary. And they have 10 days after notification to let us know if they're going to be attending. And that's usually done by June 1st. We usually have all our school choice picked and notified.
all right. Well, I'm not hearing that anybody sees any benefit to delaying and leaving it open.
I thought I heard, maybe it was Angela who said, did I hear Assabet Valley? Those, I heard Assabet Valley in there. Was that, or did I just?
Yeah, that was the original.
Yeah, that was me. Because I was looking at the school choice, and I don't know if my math is right, but it looks like there's like 99 eighth graders this year. Is that right? But they think the total of ninth graders next year would be 70 because of all the kids going to Assabet Valley, the Voc Tech school. Sorry, my son's fixing a snack. And then if we had the 10 school choice, that's 80 at Tohoto. I just have concern if not all those, if those kids come to Tohoto, if the school choice, if there's 10 school choice kids, plus not everyone that goes to Assabet is gonna be at Assabet, what would the total enrollment be? You understand my question or my concern?
Well, can I throw a couple pieces of information in there to think about? One is that the 5th grade class right now that's going to move to 6th grade is very small, very small. There's one classroom in BMS, so you're going to have, I mean, it might not be lined up so that it's even across the grades, but you're going to have a very small grade in 6th grade. In 10th grade, the current 9th grade next year's 10th grade is pretty small, and current 10th grade is pretty small. That's going to be 11th grade next year. So it might not work out to be easy across, you know, how you balance the grades. So you could potentially have a little bit more 9th, but the school capacity is going to be fine. So, you know, I do see the numbers you mentioned 99. I have an older number of 97. So there could be potentially a large grade going into 9.
No.
But that's kind of one grade that sticks out, a bit of an anomaly compared to other grades.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. That reassures me too. You're right. The overall number at Tohoto wouldn't be so large. You're right. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'm not hearing any other objections to moving forward the vote on this one, correct?
Correct.
Could I please have a motion for item C to approve school choice recommendations, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Susan seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Okay, item number D is a motion to approve the Arizona, New Mexico field trip.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you both. Questions, concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number E is to approve recommended changes to policy JFABD, homeless students enrollment rights.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you both. Questions, concerns, comments? Okay, Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Aye as well. I'm just trying to make sure I don't skip any here. Give me 1 second. Item number F is to approve recommended changes to policy JKAA, restraint procedures. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you both. Questions or comments? Hearing none. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Okay, item number G is to approve MASC recommendation for removal of the following policies as they've been deemed redundant and unnecessary. You can see items A through E as stated below. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion to remove those policies.
Second. Susan?
Cliff, Susan, thank you very much. Questions? Okay. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number H is the approval of proposed regional policy EC. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Susan?
I'll second.
Thank you both. Any questions, comments? Okay, roll call. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number I is to approve proposed regional policy EEA. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you both. Any questions or comments? Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item J is to approve the proposed regional policy EEAEC. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Questions, concerns? Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item K is an item for myself, and that is the appointing of the subcommittee for superintendent evaluation. What the background I will give you is, obviously Susan did a tremendous job with Cliff in designing sort of our procedures or whatnot as it relates to superintendent evaluation. And Cliff had the wonderful job of handling it all by himself last year. And he made the recommendation as part of that to that it be multiple people and we use a subcommittee, for that process. So both Susan and I, and this has kind of gone on for a little bit, have made gotten some feedback from both legal as well as Dorothy and MASC. There is some, I wouldn't even say contradictory, or just some difference of opinion as it relates to pros and cons of doing this. Ultimately, there isn't anything, what we found is there isn't anything from a legal perspective that should keep us from having the subcommittee. And the feedback, unless, and Susan, stop me if I'm wrong, the feedback from Dorothy was that if that's what we wanted to do, and she did lay reference to, there were a few other school districts, many of them larger, leverage the ability to use subcommittees to help do some of that. I think we will, there are some areas where Susan and I are still talking about what roles and responsibilities and items will come out of that subcommittee, but I think that obviously can be part of the job responsibility of the subcommittee. So long story short, I have to appoint multi member to that. Interestingly enough, I was trying to think about the value of the members and trying to be respectful to equity and investment and knowledge and experience, so that what we come forth with, is obviously in the best interest of the group. And again, I think we all come into this with the idea that we want to leave the committee better than it was when we started, right? So I wanted to, obviously Susan volunteered to be a member of that committee based on the terrific work that she's doing. So I'm going to be appointing Susan as one of the committee members. I then was thinking a bit about, who the other member should be. I think there's, went back and forth as it relates to, does it make sense to have the chair be one of the members of that committee in the future, or as well as I was thinking about the idea of Cliff as well, as because of his experience and what he's done in the past. And I also want to think about some of our newer members and, making sure that this group is able to then build upon what we're doing and bring it to the next group and each year. And just because, for instance, say Cliff, maybe he is or isn't part of the committee, doesn't mean we can't leverage his experience and feedback and utilize his knowledge in relation to that. So with all that being said, I know that was a long soliloquy there. I'm going to nominate, unless there is any disagreement, I think I'm going to appoint Lori to work with Susan as it relates to that subcommittee. I think you're newer to the group, so I want to make sure you can start participating and being involved in some of that process. And I think it would be good to, kind of bring some of that knowledge. So unless you have any concerns about that, I'd like to appoint you and Susan to that subcommittee. Any concerns, Lori?
No, I'd be honored to be on it.
Any questions, comments, concerns from other committee members?
Good choices.
Susan, did I nail everything we've been going back and forth on?
Yeah, I just think that we should have a charge in front of us, and I think we should look at that paragraph and get that nailed down. I'm not sure we want to wait till May for Lori and I to come back with that. I think we should probably head off with that in mind so we can plan accordingly.
So are you talking about the item that you and I have been sort of going back?
Yeah, the responsibilities of the subcommittee. We had one item that we were discussing, but we had, just to review, the first task as distributing and collecting the individual rating forms. The second task, following up with individual committee members regarding any missing, incomplete, or inconsistent rating forms. So make sure we get all the data in that we need. The third item that we're discussing is how those should be compiled and whether they should be, when there's clear consensus, we fill in that form accordingly. But when there is not a clear consensus, whether we should deliberate and propose a rating for the committee to discuss, or whether we should leave that open and let the committee engage fully in reviewing the evidence around those pieces. So we have to decide that piece. And I think that's basically it. But our task is then to compile all the individual ratings into the summative rating. It's just a matter of what to do when there's not a clear consensus around a particular final rating.
So just to add on to that, so from a feedback perspective, when speaking with legal, right, there was a lot of different areas where Russ had some concerns and gave me some feedback, but the overall message from Russ was that in any of this process when it comes to superintendent evaluation, we need to make sure we do not demonstrate any bias as it relates to that. Every single committee member has their response, their vote, their opinion, however we want to state that.
Right.
So my overall concern with just the one sentence about making that the subcommittee makes a recommendation based on feedback, if there's not a final sort of consensus on that particular item, is that as much as we all sit here and logically probably would never think that the subcommittee would provide some type of biased feedback, the idea that it is making a recommendation does inherently add some type of bias in terms of which way that subcommittee felt something way or another. My recommendation was to remove that and just, if there is an item that it falls under that category, which, I don't expect it to happen a lot, but it might, is that that item just be brought to the committee as an item where there is no consensus and it's open for discussion, and the committee as a whole makes the final recommendation on which way that falls. That was my feedback and how I would like to see it lean.
I mean, I can live with that. I think it's just important that the committee have opportunity to really look at the evidence around that item, that's left open. And I think that's the hardest part, is that the committee doesn't have a chance to review this summative report with any advance notice, particularly, and it's quite soon before the meeting. And so there's just not as much opportunity to me, a bias in response is most prevalent when you don't have opportunity to have the evidence laid out in front of you. And that's why I'd rather have the subcommittee do this. But I can live with what you're saying, but we're going to have to build into the process an opportunity to really have the committee put the evidence out there to arrive at a summative rating.
Yeah, and we'll reconfirm, and I think we talked about this in one of our meetings before we went to this virtual format, was that I think we do have options and the ability to see the report earlier than we maybe had anticipated that we could see it, as long as we meet the certain public and open meeting law requirements in terms of posting and X, Y, and Z. So I think that should be an action item that we take away and just reconfirm when is the earliest that we can review that. So maybe that eliminates some of your concerns there. And then secondly, I think if there is an item, if you end up an item where you're asking that, I think the fact that we've gotten to a point where there is a topic or an item or a rating that has such, for lack of a discrepancy or difference in opinion, I think it deserves the open. I think that inherently deserves the open discussion for the groups.
Yes, which would have anyway. But yes, that's fine. Let's go ahead and give that a shot. I think the issue with the early review of the report has to do with whether we post it in the shared drive or whether it's sent directly to school committee members. But I'm not sure. We should clarify that.
Yeah, and you're going to have to clarify that with Russ, because he was very emphatic with me last year that committee members may not see the data until the meeting. And that was, which was astounding to me. And he said Jeff couldn't see it until the meeting. So if he's had a change of point of view, that's great. But if he's emphatic again, you may have to live with that.
We've heard some different things. I think we heard something different from him this year, and I think we heard something different from MASC.
Okay.
So I think, we should just circle around that one more time, because the time that people have to digest this is a significant document, needless to say, particularly since we go right into a compensation conversation and executive session typically following that. So it just doesn't make sense to me to hurl a whole lot of sort of text and evidence and recommendations in front of people and have them very quickly turn around and vote things. So we've got to.
I don't disagree with your point of view. I'm just
No,
telling
I
you
know. Yeah.
what I was, I had my marching orders last year.
Yeah. I had the feeling it was something different this year, but let's, Jim, we can follow up.
I can have that discussion with Russ. I slightly recall some discussions around it can be where I've got some gray area. It can be posted to our drive. Obviously, we have to access individually. Can't have any discussions. All that stuff. We need to make sure we meet all those requirements. The piece I want to talk to Russ about though is obviously Jeff's access, which I think Jeff should have access when we have access anyways, but is public access and when it's posted, right? So that's the one piece I want to confirm with Russ and how that works. But I think that's an easy question. We can get a quick answer to that.
Okay. So Lori and I can go ahead and meet in the meantime and sort of just do a little planning, right?
Yes, let me officially, for Christy's sake, I will appoint Lori and Susan to the superintendent evaluation subcommittee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, we're almost there. Item L, could I have a motion to approve the 2021 NRT transportation contract, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
I heard Cliff. Roll call. Susan?
Aye.
Cliff?
Aye.
Angela?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Item number M is to approve 2020 NRT transportation settlement. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
I heard Angela, then Susan. We'll go Angela moved, Susan second. Okay, Susan.
Aye.
Cliff.
Aye.
Angela.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. And the last item is N, Program of Studies for TRMHS. That's a first read. Sorry, that's not even a vote. That is
I have a question about that one. When does that have to be approved? The program of studies. I mean, is there a timeline for Cliff? Was that on the original calendar for a certain date, like June or something?
Yes, I think needs to be approved by May, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. I just feel like it was just posted this afternoon. It feels like this doesn't really count as a first read.
Oh, okay. I was just going to ask. I didn't see it. So
I was going to say, I don't see it on the drive, so maybe it's there, but I haven't found it yet.
I'd rather have the first read be next month, but I don't know if that's going to put us in any timeline trouble.
I think that Jeff and Diane can answer that question better than I can.
Is Jeff still here? Oh, here he is. Okay, see he's on mute.
No,
There you are.
the audio's been spotty, so I shut the video off. I don't know if are you talking about like a statutory date?
You know, just why it was on the calendar for a particular date. I think it was on there for some specified date.
It was on Cliff's calendar, but I don't know if there's a statutory date for it.
Okay. I mean,
but I don't think there
it's
is.
a first read and June was the second read. It seemed like we'd still be in decent form.
We approve our student handbook in June as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So we could maybe do them both in June.
Well, if Diane and Jeff don't need it earlier, why not?
Okay.
Okay, so we will then, Kristen, I guess we will re-add that for first read for the May meeting.
Can I ask a question about the program of studies? If we don't approve it till, when do students need to see it? When does the guidance department need it for scheduling? I mean, when, isn't that something that needs to be approved so that they can then go ahead and publish the information to students and then?
Well, they schedule in the summer. They schedule in the summer, so it's got to be done before then.
So it doesn't happen till summer. Okay.
They don't schedule in the high school until summer.
Okay. When do students typically receive it?
Usually, I don't know. I don't know when they hand it out.
Well, I would assume that we have to approve it before they give it to students.
Well, they're probably already selecting classes. I mean, they start that process pretty early, but, you know, but unless they're offering something new.
Okay. It's just, I'm wondering why we approve a program of studies that's already a fait accompli, if everyone already knows what it is and they've all signed up for it already. Why are we approving it in June?
Another way we could do it is maybe is to put it on as a first read for April 28th and approve it in May.
Well, I'm just wondering, do we need to approve it at all, Jeff? Is that a requirement?
It is.
Okay, so are we approving? I guess I have a basic question then. Do we approve it before the students see it, or we approve it? Oh, do we approve it after it's all done? I mean, what are we approving?
By law, school committee has to approve a program of studies.
At what point? Before the students register or after the students register?
Well, they don't officially go, they don't officially, you know, it's not an official registration till they schedule.
Okay.
Let me ask this question in a sort of a different way. Let me ask another question. Jeff, when is the program of studies for the next year due? When is it completed?
What do you mean, when is it completed? You should have it already.
But when, all right, so when was that completed? So it was, say we got it now as a first read, right? For this week, was it just completed last week and we see it because the due date from the school is to have it completed by?
No, I think Tohoto completes theirs in by March.
Okay, so should it be? Okay, so so maybe that's why we first read it in April. So if they're completing it in March, we wouldn't see it as a first read until the April meeting.
Normally.
Logistically, right?
I'm really not trying to make this more complicated, but
No, I'm just saying it should be a first read the following meeting from when it's due, right?
Yeah.
That's when it should be a first read.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just didn't receive it with any time today.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I got the answer to the question. We're statutorily required to approve the program of studies. And it just seemed, it's been a question in my head over the years I've been on the school committee. We always seem to be approving it after it's like, well, it's already underway, everyone's registered and it's scheduled. Like, well, then why are we approving it then? Why don't we approve it before all that happens? I don't understand what
I don't think, I'm almost positive that you wouldn't approve it after it's been scheduled. Because I don't know any high school that I know of that schedules, you know, before June. Most of them do it in the summer. I don't know anybody who does it like would do it now. I know that kids would start looking at courses, but I don't know anybody who would schedule. I don't know anybody who would schedule. And I know that Diane and Sally schedule in the summer, so you wouldn't approve it before they scheduled. I know that to be true.
But I don't want to belabor this, it's getting late, but if students are looking at a course of studies and they're making requests, but it's a course of studies nobody's approved, I don't know. I just find that very odd. That's all. I don't want to belabor the point.
Well, the good news is you are going to have plenty of time to read this.
There we go.
So there was the idea of making a first read on the 28th, but personally, unless there is a time, unless I hear Jeff tell me there's a reason and we have a time constraint that we need to do that, I would prefer to leave that off the agenda for the 28th and just make it an agenda item on our next official meeting. I think it's good practice to only do emergency items during a governance workshop that are time sensitive. So I'd like to avoid that that practice if we can.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment.
Okay. All right. So Christy, it'll go on for May. Thank you. All right. We were flying through those votes till the end. Did good though. Good job, everybody. Okay. Again, we saw the future agenda items in our next scheduled meetings. Just Susan reminded us early on, we're going to start at 6 o'clock. Let me ask the committee this real quick. 6 o'clock start time was based on a conflict Dorothy had 2 months ago whenever we were supposed to do this originally in person. Do we want to keep it 6 o'clock or do we want to use our standard 6:30 time? Does anybody have trouble getting on at 6 o'clock? Because something tells me 6:30 might be available now. Would everybody prefer 6? Get it done over and early?
I should be able to move the couple things, so I don't have a problem with it.
I'm fine either way.
Either way, I'm fine.
Okay, let's keep 6 then, because that would get us off of it earlier if we start earlier. And I'll confirm with Dorothy on that. Just obviously keep in mind, Boylston is not rescheduled their town meeting date yet, or at least that I have heard. They've not rescheduled yet, so that's still up in the air. We may need to put together some quick meetings like we did last week if there's any need from Jeff or Bob as we could head towards any type of budget requirements or votes or whatnot. So I appreciate everybody's flexibility in advance. With that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second that.
And Christy, we got a roll call that one too? All right, roll call.
Aye.
Susan.
Aye.
Cliff.
Aye.
Angela.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
And I as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
All right.
you.
Good.
Good
Thank
job,
you, everyone.
everyone.
All right.